we are all the time running to some sources of pleasure to avoid pain, like an opposite. And we are never trying to heal that wound inside us.
Hey, you. Thanks for tuning in. Just a quick heads up, this episode is rated PG-13, so expect to hear some mild language or adult concepts.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And I think I'm going to introduce you fairly simply as Federico, a massage therapist that I got to see a couple of times in Argentina while I was there. And a lot of our tango tour team also got to come and have massages with you, and they all had their own experience. And we had some very interesting conversation in some of my massages, and I thought it would be fun to bring that up and reprise some of that for my podcast audience. And I also wanted to let you know at the end if you want to talk about where people can find you. A lot of my listeners are not in Argentina, but some of them are, and you can always send people to this episode so that they can learn more about you. So,
okay, I have just an Instagram, so
perfect. Yeah,
they can find me. Well, I didn't know. I mean, I did. We don't talk about how or what is the opinion of the other lieutenants who take massage with me. But I do feel like when I speak with Sarah and all other members, it's really caught my attention how people from USA, America, North America, actually, they find something really different in the massage with a lot of time Latin people. Like, I don't know, maybe we have something with the body contact or something with the, well, we are the people who stand closer to each other in the world. So, but I don't know how the rest of the people actually feel it. I don't know how they transmit it. I mean, with me, they was really, well, they speak really nice about my work. So I found that like a good connection happen. It's not something I can do alone, if you don't allow me to get in, I can't. It's not like a magical power, it's more like a dance, actually. I think it's the most similar to dance, a massage. It has any sense what I say?
yeah, it makes perfect sense. I'm pausing to let you finish and also to make sure I mute and unmute myself so I don't cause any problems with the squeaking of my chair. Yeah, I think you're right. I think we do have a very different amount of personal space in the US. And so having someone that has a much smaller personal space area, just being so connected and so comfortable around people, does make you think about things and make you think about your body and your care in a different way. At least that's my experience.
And it's weird because we used to be really close to others, and we usually are not that fear to human contact. But at the moment of the treat, how we speak to others, we don't put so many energy to be polite. I usually find like Australian, Canadian, American people are so nice to speak with me. Sometimes I get this sensation that, where is my hug? Like, they are so nice with me, and then it's like they leave, and it's like, what the fuck? Why you don't hug me? Like, touch me a little at least. And we are just the opposite. We are kind of aggressive in the way we speak, but we are really nice in the way we touch. Maybe we are like easy huggers.
I like that. Where's my hug? We got so close, we're like friends now. Why are you leaving without hugging me?
Yeah, like you say, I like you. Why you like me, etc. Why you don't hug me? Like, touch me, please. So yeah, that's, I think, is the most different characteristic we have about the contact.
That's really cool. So I've gotten some feedback from some of the other people that were on the tour and had a massage with you. And one in particular, Andrew, has told me I can share some of what his experience was, and he will probably come on and share some more too. He had a very short trip in Argentina. It was only 3 days. It was supposed to be a lot longer. But in the 3 days, having the massage with you, which had some chiropractic in it and a lot of other really interesting modalities that you build into your massage, which I very much appreciated. And he got to feel all of that all at once and feel all of Argentina all at once. And he walked away saying that his brain and his eyes aligned in a way that he'd not been able to get them to do in a long time. And I'm going to let him talk about his version of that story. But I just wanted to tell you, he still talks about that massage 3 weeks, 4 weeks later. I don't remember. A long time.
Really is amazing the way we can reach others so deeply.
Yeah.
We are so like restricted in our culture to like only affect others in the situation of making a family, right? Like that's the structure. If you want to affect someone's life, you have to be a partner. There is no other options, right? Like suddenly feel part of other in a constructive way from others' lives through just something so antique, so ancient. Like massage is so ancient. I mean, I study really modern techniques, but we start with massage in the birth of humanity. I mean, like even cats do it. I don't know. It builds some trust, so intimacy, I guess, like from 0 to a lot in some short time.
Yeah, it is a lot of intimacy, and it is interesting that you bring up we're used to being able to do this and provide this for our partners, but not for just anybody. We have to be very close, and they have to give us a lot of permission for that kind of connection, that kind of change, that kind of intimacy.
Yeah, and imagine if you change the gender, it was extremely more problematic. Like if a man do it with another man, like have this intimacy touch, it's like, wow, what are you doing? And if you do it with a woman, like, hey, what do you think their husband going to think about this? Like how other human rather than your husband will give you any feeling of pleasure or nice feeling that is not your husband. It's like, wow, that's a big thing. And what's the point to live in a society surrounding of all these people if we can give pleasure to others? I mean, we can have different types of pleasure, but I don't know. I remember one chat. I'm sorry if I go to a really long branch, you can stop me. I remember one talk in this movie of Tarantino when he says they're both boys talking about there is nothing sensual in a foot massage. So he say like, okay, so you will do a foot massage to a guy, and he get like freeze, like frozen, right? So it's something so, and it's for me, it's like, yeah, why not? Like everything can be erotic and everything can not to be erotic. Like you can learn about that. Like I don't think erotism or is bounded to just a simple action. It's a more complex construction. We are told like we can have like a reaction to some actions that's, for example, like, okay, if you touch this can transform in sexual. And well, if you say that to me when I am a kid and you repeat that all my life, maybe I will be like that because you are programming, you're making a program on me. But if we allow us to put every feeling in a true situation, in or real true, I think we can find another ways to touch each other or help each other. It's not everything sexual. It's not everything. It's intimacy, but it's not intimate, but it's not sexual or erotic, etc. It's not the only way to feel pleasure.
in the United States, oftentimes when people say intimacy, they're talking about sexual intimacy. So I'm going to say what you just said there really clearly. It wasn't sexual intimacy. It wasn't genital touch. It wasn't any of that. It was just connected and caring.
I'm here. I'm here for you. And I'm here for what makes you vulnerable, what makes you, what you want to share from your inside. I think that's intimacy. Like, I'm here for that. Just that. I don't know. Like, we don't only keep inside us sex intentions. We keep inside a lot of things who make us feel vulnerable to others. So share that, I think, is intimacy.
Yeah, I agree. And you probably remember this. Our first two massages together were very tranquil. And then my third massage with Federico, I got completely I was crying when I walked in the door. I had been crying for like 2 hours. So talk about vulnerability. And it was really helpful to have already this connection, this ability to know that you were going to be able to hold this space for me. And otherwise, I probably would have canceled. Like if I had had a massage like that in the United States and I was feeling that way, I would have canceled. There's no way.
And you came just like crying, like really like relaxed with that. And it was like, well, cool, because everything's fine with this. Like it's just an emotion and you are handle it pretty well. That's what you do with sadness and anguish. You just cry and process and like, and we learn actually processing emotions. We learn. It's not something just we throw away or we just like it's not trash. When we process an emotion, we can learn about that. I think that's the most rich process, and that's the part for me is so it makes me some noise. It's like why, as individual, we have to represent like a boundary or a limit to the other to process their emotions. Why we have this so insulated in, you know, if the so like grab or no recorded in our minds that an individual, other individual, is just like a stop to our feelings. Like, wait, keep this for your home, and then never happens. Like we never do that alone because we need the companionship, or we need some witness or something who take care of us or represent some protections to us to be able to go inside and work with our emotions or work with our pain, for example. I understand why we should represent an enemy for that process.
Yeah. Why we should push people away when they're having emotions instead of letting them be with somebody while they're having their emotions. I think the reason why it triggers people so often is if you have your own unresolved emotions, then somebody else getting emotional around you is like, well, now I have to let myself feel it, or you can't stop it from feeling because there's so much emotion in the room.
I think that can trigger a reaction to that, but we have a really practice and a really established argument, who is how I can capitalize this moment, right? Like what works for me, why this worked for me. So we are so used to justify everything for money, for example, or for I'm working. So how can I capitalize? I'm hearing you cry or I'm hearing you sob. Why this is useful to me? So why I supposed to do it, right? Like, and it's like we are not told or teach the brightness or the useful in the community or in our hearts to be able to share this moment with other people, like be part of the emotional process of the other. Doesn't mean we're going to be friends forever, but it's a way to experience the humanity and experience the other part, other human, in a way who is not a constant demand, because the other always represents or a demand of money, of time, of attention, or something to ignore, right? Like if it's a familiar or something I care about, it's something who can demand something from me. And if it's not, it could be a danger. If it's not, okay, I ignore. But I mean, there is something nice in just sharing, and deep too.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice to have that witness. I think I've talked about that a few times on my podcast because that's usually what I'm looking for when I'm looking for a partner. I'm independent and strong, and I've got a lot of things that I need on my own, but what I really do need is a witness, is a companion, is someone to be around, someone to be there, and to know what I'm doing and to care.
We are asking for share the experience. I don't asking for someone to make the experience able to me. I mean, I don't need someone to allow me to have an experience. I need someone to share the experience. I mean, I have the power, I can do it on my own, but I want to share it. And I want to hear another opinion. I don't need it. I want it. I mean, it's like, I think that's the big difference. But when you say it that way, it sounds selfish, right? Like we have to need emotions. like like an emergency. Like always it's an emergency if there is an emotion inside. Like it's not a desire. It's just it must to be a need. If you don't, it's like I mean how intense. And I think we have to learn about that. I don't know if we have a time, but I think we have to start learning about that, about sharing emotions or sharing. Well, we are already doing it. I mean, there is a lot of groups. Maybe it's not the mainstream, but there is a lot of spaces you can share.
Yeah, and I think there are some public spaces that are starting to evolve a little bit past the default emotional way of being. There's a TV show on Apple TV called Ted Lasso, and it's an American show, but it's about an American football coach that goes to the UK to coach soccer. And it's a fun little cultural differences episode at the beginning, but then it really evolves into this cool, like, what if the locker room was a very supportive place instead of a place where people competed with each other? What would that look like? And to me, that's what that show has evolved into. Like, what could healthy masculine and healthy feminine working together look like?
You know, here feminism is working and is advancing a lot in an overwhelming speed, right? Sometimes that speed make it chaotic, but the impact on men, straight men specifically, they feel so like they lost their place because they was fighting to become one kind of individual in the society, and suddenly that individual is everything wrong, right? They feel completely wrong, like no one wants what they have to give. So some men spaces start to create, and first my reaction was like, oh really, you think you think men require more men space? Like for real. And then what I see is they start to create like a space, some places to be more emotional. And when I see these chats, sorry, I mean I am really arrogant about this, but for me it was so basic. Like they allow them to feel a little, and it was so basic. The proposal was so basic. I mean, maybe I expressed myself incorrectly. Like I go to one of that chats, and they start with something like, okay, just try to connect with the feeling and share with the person. And like almost more than the half was like sobbing, unraveling, like crying. Although it was just like really like only this was you need to like, just explode. And then I remember that I have a lot of moments in my life where I go to search for that space of continence and all that. And I guess that's the reason I'm more like practice about that. And it doesn't surprise me that much, that shot. But yes, it happens to me the first time. Like we are like men are not used to share with others without the violence between that sharing. Like you can get close to a man without some kind of violence. If you go like a nice friendship touch, even touch is like how you dare, right? Like you are gay or what? Like everything has to be like impregnated with some sexual intention or violent intention, right? Like men can't get close to other without that charge, and I think it's so unfair. And I understand how that is I don't know, it's so deeply inside us, like, because for me, even now, it's sometimes I feel that mechanism acts inside me. Like even now, I'm a 40, right? And working with this like 20 years ago, I started with this, and even now, I feel that is inside me. Like that's mechanism, that idea. I see myself getting close to other man, like, hey, bro, like where this has come from, like, well, that's
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it quite from that perspective, that it's either erotic touch or aggressive and got some level of violence touch to it. Huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like they want to enter in you in some way. Like I'm crossing a boundary. There is no other reason to get close to a man, or there is no other way to interpret the way. Well, I think that's the main discussion. If women are supposed to be what heals, what is soft, tender, and nice, that means that men should be what? The opposite always? Like we have the thing that harms, the thing is tough, the thing is rough. It's like something, it's just an antagonism that, or a contrast that occur like naturally. If some characteristics are only for one gender, then automatically I must be the other part. And the other part is a shit in case of men, right? Like, because I don't want to be all that all the time, constantly, like forced to be violent, tough, strong, and proving my strong all the time. Like women like that, they have to prove they are beautiful all the time, right? Like always makeup, always nice, always lady. Like I'm not that all the time. I don't have to. I mean, even in nature, it doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah, there's so much of a blend everywhere. We can't find extremes without finding the extremes that created those extremes in the first place, if that makes sense.
Except Birds of Paradise. Birds of Paradise are really weird in that situation. I don't know. It's really random data. But it's a really random fact. But the males are extremely colorful and weird. Like they look like aliens, birds, and the females are like gray or brown. Like a brown simple bird against a yellow fluor creature, like really full of feathers and weird shapes, dancing, and the woman is like a real simple lame bird. That is the only way. I mean, the only example I can think. So twisted as like us, right? Like humans.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think about the reasons why, right? Like the reasons why the female birds have so much less color and they camouflage so much better is because they're supposed to be sitting on this nest with a bunch of eggs in it for a long time and they don't want anyone to see them. They're vulnerable. They don't want anyone to know that they're there. So yeah.
But males can be eaten. Males can be eaten. Nature has no problem with that.
Well, the colorful males is so that the women will want to dance with them, right?
Okay, we don't need you anymore. Thanks for your DNA. You can die now. Bye-bye.
Yeah, it must be very interesting having so much of that masculine, feminine in your culture. I mean, you grew up with it, so you may not see it the way I see it. But in the US, there's been so much move in the last few decades to make women be as strong as men, paid as well as men, do all the things that men can do, that in some ways a lot of women have turned into men and not women anymore. And so there's a lot more of Trying to meet in the middle and be everything instead of allowing our differences to be things that we can use to polarize and work with each other.
I think the most damaging of that, of the idea of you have to be in some way, like we give you one ideal and you have to try to be that ideal, and then maybe we can bring you two ideals, like you can be this or you can be that. I mean, in that moment when you are like fighting to reach one of the points, you never fight to find yourself. Like, and let's face it, find ourselves is not easy, because it's not true that in past time it was better. Like, we are savage creatures with a lot of horrible feelings and instinct, and with time, with learning, with education, we reach to be nicer people, I guess, and to grow up emotionally and know ourselves better and all that requires a lot of insight. And if you are fighting all the time to reach a place to make you, I don't know, the way, the world when you deserve something. I mean, if you are fighting all the time to be worth this title of woman or man, or when you find yourself, when you, I mean, you can live 1,000 lives and don't live one for your own, right? Like, if you are always feeling this call for something better who exists before you. So like there is always a place for you who exists before you, and you have to adapt to that place and never move it too much. Like it could not be true. I don't think it can't work for everyone. Like every idea, like I don't know, monogamia, feminism, machism, everything, nothing could fit for everyone. It's impossible because we are weird creatures.
And isn't that great? I appreciate all that variety quite a lot.
Yeah, me too. But I mean, I'm really happy actually. I'm living in Argentina, in the capital, when in the main city, when all this happened. Like, of course, I can appreciate the simplicity with a law and the basics in the fields and everything, or but I don't appreciate this idea, this entitlement people has of say like you have to live like this way or you're wrong. Like, who the fuck asked you? I mean, I don't appreciate that part. I appreciate the part of okay, yes, well, tradition, culture, everything. But I really like to this culture of okay, be whatever you want, and if I can be happy with you, I will just move away. I don't need to kill you. I don't need to censorship you, or I don't need to suppress you.
I loved the way you said that. You can live 1,000 lives and never live yours. And that reminds me of something else that you said in one of the massages that we had together about pleasure being the sensation of the body opening or something like that.
It's like the language or the code the body opens. Like if you try to see the body as simple you can to understand how it works. I mean, the body is extremely complex. It's really hard to understand completely how it works, but in a really humble way to get close to create a solution for a patient, it's okay to know some truth about the body. And one of them is pain will make people close and body close at least, and pleasure will create probably an opening. And we have to learn how to use pleasure in a therapeutic way. In a society where when someone gives you pleasure, he's hitting on you. So it's kind of hard sometimes for my work to enter in the structure of the symptom to alleviate the pain or alleviate the symptom without have this fear that the other person feels I'm flirting or I'm, surpassing some boundaries I should not. So it's really common in my work that my colleagues goes to the pain, right? Like, no, I really like to make a hard massage, like with my elbow inside the ribs and all that. And I realized that I have the same feeling. Like my first way to learn massage was searching a constructive way to use pain, right? Like something inside me sent me to that search. And a lot of people in that classes feel comfortable with the idea of, okay, we are creating a lot of pain, but it's for a better good. And when I start entering in the, because I fail a lot, so I mean, using that technique, like, I become an expert in failing. Then I start to trying another stuff. And in that class, when we start to using the pleasure to create that situation, it was extremely uncomfortable for everyone. Like, you are making me feel so good, and I feel my body open, like, oh, like something so make you like, I don't want this because it makes me feel I need you right now. Like, I don't want to, you make me feel so good because I will become, I don't know, kind of dependent of that person, right? And even for me, sometimes I suppress my instinct to give a good massage. It don't happen anymore. But to people who I don't find, I don't know, attractive, where I feel like needy, like I was afraid that maybe if I so good for this person going to be like too dependent to me, and nothing doesn't happen, never happens. It's like it's something really healthy we can share about these techniques of pleasure, of opening, and people usually get, grateful, satiated, and they hug you, they charge you, and they go away, like, and they can forgive you. I mean, forget you easily. It's not like creates a dependence. Actually, it creates more freedom when you teach people that they have a tool to alleviate their pain through the pleasure, healthy one, right? We are always looking for pleasure, and that made us to eating McDonald's, drugs, wine, alcohol, drugs, and sex. All the time looking for pleasure to alleviate or avoid pain or suffering. Well, actually, that's this mechanism in Ayurveda is extremely studied. Like we run to pleasure to avoid pain. I mean, that process, we hurt ourselves because we are so desperate to escape from the pain that we don't have higher pleasure. We go to lower pleasure, and we become so easy to trick, to deceive, because we can't connect with ourselves. When we start connecting with the healthy pleasure, we become stronger and more free.
And that's really interesting that you brought that up and said it that way, because I, having been running this podcast for 6 years now, I think, and it's been called Pleasure Central Radio the whole time. Every time I introduce it to somebody, I'm like, oh, this is what I do, and I talk about pleasure, then there is almost unfailingly a conversation about what is too much pleasure and what is not enough. And then they'll be like, well, you can't just follow pleasure your entire life. Like, well, it depends on the quality of the pleasure that you are allowing. Because like you just said, we can be tricked into taking smaller and smaller pleasures. But when we know what healthy pleasure feels like and what it feels like to actually be fueled by what we're doing and not be depleted, then that makes a huge difference. A pleasure that adds energy to my life versus pleasure that takes energy from my life, I treat those very, very differently, and I think everybody should.
Yes, actually, I mean, if we feel it or see it like a structure, right? Like for example, muscles is a lot of sarcomeras, like a lot of fibers touching themselves and in contact, creating like a structure, right? Creating a tissue. what pleasure do is basically to allow one by one, or at least when we try to do in these techniques to create pleasure, to make an opening to a place or to a point who is generating these limits in the movement, who creates the stress, who creates the pain, etc. What we do is try to like expand the area of perception, right? Like when the muscle or when the area feels pain, what it does is contract, right? Like a turtle who enters in the shell, right? What we try to do is invite all that feeling, the capacity sensitive to go outside, right? It's almost what we do in the massage is like that. It's like call something, call, yeah. We are trying to call something like afraid inside a person to go outside. Like everything is okay. Come to see, come to enjoy. And when there is something about I don't know if you hear it, about the limbic capitalism.
No, I don't think I've heard of that.
Okay, I don't want to enter in something so politic, or so economic, but it's the idea of the study of the pleasure and the desire is now focusing in, okay, what make you buy something, right? So the idea of your desire and your satisfaction is closer. The idea is to make it the most close possible. So you see something, feel desire, you buy it, or you take it, or you eat it, or you experience in some way, you have and you feel satisfaction. And again, and again, and again. So what's the problem with this? You don't have learning in that. The idea of an experience calling for you to be experienced is the idea of, I mean, pleasure is kind of the north to find something who is good for us. That's the reason we are easily tricked, because we can, well, actually all the religions, dogmatic religions says, watch out with pleasure, because that can deviate you from the correct path, right? And the second part is, I will say you where find the path. It's the path I say, right? That's the part of the idea is not correct. But the first part is okay, like take care, because if only look for pleasure, you could have an hedonist life with nothing good, nothing deep created. But the truth is, we can use pleasure in a way to construct ourselves and grow. I mean, if we are not in danger, if we are protected, that most of us are, we can build through pleasure, we can build a healthy body. Actually, the easier way to avoid smoking or avoid eating junk food is to join the feeling of satisfaction with the feeling post eating or post enjoying. Like, don't see like separated ways, separated things. Like, okay, I really want a hamburger, but I have to add to that thought or to that desire the consequence. Like, okay, you're going to have this consequence. You enjoy that consequence too because they came together. So the idea, well, actually, meditation is the same. We can be more wise to choose a path with more tones of pleasure, right? Like the pleasure can have tones. I think it's the same difference between the sex who is extremely genital. Like people believe sometimes that sex is only genital, like a blowjob or penetration. And sex is so much more than that, right? I mean,
So much.
so much. And the intimacy can be constructed without almost no contact, right? And it's still sexual, because I think sexual for Tantra, sexual is the intention of share with the other, let the other enter inside you and change you. It's like the dance of encounter, right? Like, is enjoy that part, the part of something different with a history enters inside you and change you, like a new color. And you don't need penetration for that. What you need is an opening. And that opening can be emotional or can be in the skin. It don't have to be especially in a hole. We have
Yeah, I like that. The opening can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in a hole.
doesn't have to be a hole, because feeling that philosophy, people try doing through the ear, and it doesn't work, right? Like poetry. I mean, you remember the idea of the Marquess of Sade, the Sade Marquess, the Mark.
The Marquis de Sade, that one.
Yeah, it was like the way he write, like create a reaction inside the people who start to release the darkest desire in the entire town. I mean, the entire city or town. I don't remember the area. I mean, the people in the area start like releasing their deepest desire, and their deepest desire always go to something kind of bad. But if we can jump the idea of go to something so pervert, I think it's something like that. Like there is like a spark who inspire to feel yourself, to find yourself, just to start knowing yourself, and then you can find healthier ways to feel pleasure. But first of all, you have to allow yourself to be your own guide in some point, because if you're always waiting for the world to say you what you do and what you not, well, you will probably don't find it. Like, I mean, there is people selling you. I mean, people lives from sell pleasure. So if you don't, I don't know if it has anything sense what I'm saying, because it's really hard for me to say it in English. So maybe you have to date.
I think I'm getting the gist of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm so confused saying it.
Yeah, I think it is a useful conversation to have, to talk about too, about where we get tricked into pleasure and when we forget about the entire cost of what we're doing. Like you're saying, if I'm going to eat that hamburger, am I going to be happy with the stomachache after? Or, whatever the cost is for you for that action. If you're not choosing that consciously, then in some ways you're just blundering into limbic capitalism. Is that what you called it?
Yeah, actually, another person call it that way. Is really a smart person. I don't try to to steal their work, but it's something like that. Like something, it's about to make it faster, right? Like faster. Like the call of the marketing must be more primitive, more to your brain, the deepest part of your brain, where you have less barriers. Like you feel the stimuli and you act immediately. So I think what we have to wonder or ask ourselves is why we become so addicted to pleasure, right? Or so what's the word? Like so scared of disgusting sensations, like for example, the anxiety of speak about something who is uncomfortable, right? Because in some point, when we speak about pleasure, we are speaking in a really nice way of pleasure. But when we make a look in the society or I don't want to speak about the society, but in the experience we have all the time, I don't know, ghosting. Why ghosting exists? Well, because people don't want to experiment the most small annoying thing in the bonding situation that is given negative. I don't want to say you something negative. I don't want to pass that moment. I don't want to experience this moment. So what I do? I disappear. Like, so why we run in this mindless way to pleasure? That's the question I do myself a lot, or try to investigate, is why we become so compulsive sometimes. And we can see we are in the cycle of pleasure pain, who becomes smaller, until we are just running in a circle and never expanding the experience, making it shorter, right? Like I see that in a lot of people in my surroundings, that the only thing who stop them for eat more or fuck more is pain, disease, damage, some kind of damage, like economic damage, emotional damage. Like, how is possible we are so ignorant that the only way we find is to keep advancing or keep going forward is through damage. There must be a wiser way to do it, right? Like, it's weird because we don't see pleasure as a guide. We see pleasure as a problem, but as a painkiller too.
Double-edged sword, isn't it?
But it's like we conceive ourselves like someone in palliative care, like we are always sick, always dying, always suffering. So, well, I know it's wrong, but I will smoke this cigarette. Okay, so what pain this situation is alleviating, that you choose this? Because if you choose this, probably that we know smoking is wrong, right? Or it's bad for your health. But if you choose this, what is worse that you are running away, right? I don't know if we are teach to make ourselves that question. Why am I running away that I choose junk food? I'm really that bad? Like,
and there's almost a piece of having to understand what something is costing you. Like, you know that junk food is bad for you, but you eat it anyway. But until it's bad enough that you're like, oh, this is actually having an impact on my life, then it's kind of easy to say, oh, but it's just a little piece of sugar, or it's just a cigarette here and there, or something like that. But the more it builds up and the bigger impact it starts to make, the bigger cost it's causing you, the more focus we have to put into it, and the more we have to ask that question in order to help ourselves move through something.
I guess it's the logical way to see it, but it seems like it becomes more work. Like, it's like, and if I feel it, if I see it through the entropy point of view, it sounds like older we get, it's going to be harder to resist this pleasure threats, right? Like, Ayurveda has a really nice way to see it. They propose something that is kind of challenging for our ideas, because it's like go inside all the time to express ourselves outside in a better way, right? Like, Ayurveda believes like we have like filters. I'm explaining this like really wrong. Please don't take my word. Your own investigation. But like, we have like filters. We took the energy from outside. Okay, like everything feed us. Companionship, people around us, sounds, smells, views, food. Pleasure is a way we experience our pain, right? Or the way we can know if something is well for us or not. But for Ayurveda, the word taste, the word like flavor, is almost the same to express flavor is the same to express emotion and desire. This means that we go to search, or we try to experience some emotion through taste. So, for example, when you have a really ugly day in the work, or a bad day in the work, or you feel yourself like rejected or mistreated, you will probably go to eat something you eat in your birthday, where your life is celebrated, right? So it's not weird that we search for something sweet when we feel life is tough with us. That's the reason, because that's probably the reason because all the processed food has sugar in it. Even sugar who doesn't have a sweet taste, but it has sugar in it. The funny part is Ayurveda, the wise, or the people who study and create Ayurveda in that moment, they didn't know how the brain was made, but they could recognize that we're going to search for sweet taste when we need comfort or hurt and feel like more like when we want love, right? Like we want love and we want to feel wanted and desired, etc. We search for sugar or for sweetness. So I guess we are all the time running to some sources of pleasure to avoid pain, like an opposite. And we are never trying to heal that wound inside us. That's the reason we create mechanism of compulsion. So we start like, don't stop choosing. That's the thing. We lose our freedom because we stop choosing our way. We just act in a mechanism of, okay, bad day, give me some fries. My boss yell at me, give me some beer. My partner betray me, give me some whiskey. Or my father didn't give me a dinosaur, so give me heroin. Like, I think Ayurveda in that subject, they have a really simple and effective way to speak about. I mean, to create the idea of treat that wound inside us, who create this desperate idea of, okay, I need this to satisfy. I need it now. Why? I don't know. Just let me get it. Like something so childish, actually. I think it's childish. I don't think it's like an animal. It's more, I don't feel like savage or primitive. I think it's more like childish.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I understand what you're saying now about seeing the cost and knowing what you're doing is the long way around. It is easier to just give yourself what you need for that hurt, but you have to figure out what that is and pay attention to it first.
Yes, because I think in the moment we are trying our ways to resist the temptation, there is a lot of mind training and learning how to surpass our barriers. So it's a fight you will never win, because there's people studying exactly that. Like, you go out in the street and you start walking, and all the time you will find something who will promise you will feel better if you take that, right? Like, everything promises you to be happier, to be better, to alleviate your pain. But if you go through the process of understand, yeah, that's the key. I will try to explain correctly. Every wound you have in your soul, in your system, close a part of you who can feel pleasure. So the options of pleasure become smaller. So you're going to need a intenser, I don't know, a more intense experience to generate the same pleasure, right? So it's like, if you have a food with 6 ingredients, it's going to have some taste. If you only have 1 ingredient for reach the same taste, you will try with, I don't know, with salt. So you're going to use a lot of salt. Like, like people who eat junk food, that after 10 years they want the burger with 6 floor of cheddar and like a cascade of cheese, and you say, I mean, it's the same ingredient but more times. How this can be pleasure? Well, one of the reasons is because you don't have the capacity to feel another types of pleasure, another types of taste, and I think that's happened with us. We start with some wounds. War is like that. It's part of the experience. We get traumatized, so we escape from that experience, from the good and the bad. So life starts to appearing like more like really lame. So we search for intenser experience. So I dance, I don't know, once I go to a discotheque, I start dancing and someone reject me, so I feel silly. So I stop dancing, right? I don't have that capacity to express myself because I don't remember even why I lose it, right? 10 years later, some friends say me, hey, come to this party, take this pill. You took it. You start dancing. You move repeatedly in the same way. I don't know if it's dancing. It's just you start like doing that, and that becomes like, okay, I feel the discharge. This is okay. So I want to do it again. So now, what happened if I took 2 pills? And then I think a better question: what happens if you go to that moment in your life when you feel really embarrassed, when you get rejected, and you believe that the reason was because you was dancing bad or whatever, and you start to feeling the pleasure of dance like an African child can do it, without a pill, without etc. So in that moment, when you make owner of your own pleasure, removing and healing what's don't allow you to do it. I don't know how to explain. I'm sorry. And in that moment, you become owner of your pleasure. So you are not so susceptible or so weak to resist, to take a pill or to become drunk or whatever. I mean, there is a lot of people who say, I'm a really good dancer when I'm drunk. How that work?
And generally, you just think you're a really good dancer when you're drunk.
I think it's kind of a social construct we made, like, okay, let him enjoy themselves, right? Like, actually, that's funny because when you say, like, I'm going to go vegetarian, everyone says, like, are you sure? What about B12 vitamin? And when you say, I'm going to grab a beer, okay, great.
Such a different social acceptability for those things, huh? Especially in Argentina, where everybody eats all the meat.
Yeah, when I say, like, I'm going to be vegetarian, was like, what? Like, okay, you're right. Maybe it's better if I start with cocaine. Well, if you do it correctly, it's okay.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Funny, the things that are good for us are often discouraged, and the things that are bad for us are on every corner.
Why we do that? So funny. Like, actually, when you say, I want to eat only meat, everyone becomes food expert and nutritionist and genetist. So all at the same time, like, everyone is an expert in that moment. And when you want a line of Coke, like, it's everything become indulgence. Like, well, you are your own person.
Yeah. That's a very tricky way of looking at it, isn't it?
Speaking about that, I quit smoking.
Good for you. Congratulations. I'll celebrate that.
I didn't know why I keep doing it, because it was like, I was smoking, I don't know, 1, 2 per day and cutting at the half, because it was like too much. And one moment I asked myself, why I'm still doing this? Like, and actually it's something difficult to quit, because it's like connected to some feeling of freedom I feel when I was, I don't know, 15 maybe. So when I realized that feeling doesn't going to come back just for smoking a cigarette. Like, that was a really complex experience. Me with friends of my own age, alone, saying, hey, we are so tough, let's smoke. That was a great idea in that moment. Doing at 39 is like, you're kind of stupid. Like, you are already free. What are you rebelling about?
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah, what is the structure you are fighting against? Yourself? I mean, to breathe correctly. That's the oppressing you are fighting about. But I guess part of learning is that is pleasure is, well, I think you can have higher ways of pleasure who will teach you this is the correct way, but you need kind of detox before that, because if you don't learn how to recognize and separate between what alleviates pain and what's nourish us, you will easily trick and you will easily lose your path.
Yeah, because they're definitely not the same thing.
It's not the same thing, but they at the first they seems pretty likely. Well, when we are teenagers, sex and love are the same. We get in love of everyone who give us some touching, like, and when we get 25, for example, I don't know, that depends on the culture, but then love and sex start to separate, and right now love and sex appear to be opposite thing, right? For a lot of people who is, they're married, they have kids, they say, I really love my wife. Oh, when was the last time you fuck? I don't know, 10 years maybe, like, but I really love her. It's like, why they become separated, right? I think that's, well, that's part of, I don't know why that's happened. We need a sexologist for that, I guess.
Possibly, yeah.
The idea is they start really similar, and we have to learn how to mature, grow in that area without get confused, and keep learning well. I mean, keep choosing well. I don't know. Maybe I lost myself. Ask me something.
No, I think you got it. I think now is a good time to wrap up the interview. So how about I ask you, what is your Instagram and how can people find you?
My Instagram is Federico Langoni. There you can find me.
Fantastic.
Hey there, pleasure seeker. Well, that's it for today's conversation. Here at Pleasure Central Radio, we love using conscious communication, science geekery, and copious amounts of true pleasure to improve our partnerships, our money, and our love lives. And we hope you do too. If you loved what you heard here, we'd love a review. You can do this easily on podcast players like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it's an easy way to help more people discover the show without you having to actually bring it up with them. To hear other episodes of the podcast and get notified immediately when a new episode is released, follow me on your favorite podcast player. Find out more and get in touch at pleasurecentralradio.com. Your thought to ponder today is,
you can live 1,000 lives and never live yours.